Everybody, my name is Philip, and I'll tell you a little bit about myself here in just a second. I'm glad to be here. I've been here a time or two with Andrew. As Barry mentioned to you, Andrew and I, we went to college together. We were roommates for a little while. Had a lot of really neat experiences together. One of which, when we were in college, we were in the same social club. Had a lot of the same friends. And there was probably, I guess, maybe 2 years where we worked together at the church on campus. He was the intern for the college ministry, and I was the intern for the youth ministry. And so we'd spend not just a lot of time together in school, but also at church. And we're, again, very close to this day. We talk very, very regularly. I'm sorry, earlier I was on my phone a little bit. I'll let you know that we have 3 staff members at Peachtree City where I work. I'm the youth minister. We have a preacher named Stan. Some of you may know Stan Butt. And we have I call him the minister of common sense. If we have a preacher and a youth minister, and then basically everything else falls into Chris's bucket of responsibility. The thing about it is, we try, when you have 3 guys on staff, you try not to all be out of town at the same time. You would think, people, they like it when the ministers aren't all gone, especially when you have, a handful. We can kind of plan things. But for some reason, this Wednesday night, we sort of, I don't know how it happened, but Stan is in Nashville, Tennessee, and Chris is in Avondale speaking, and I am in Ellijay, Georgia. And so the elders are texting us, trying to get on the same page about announcements and who has what class. And so it's a little bit of chaos back there. Maybe they're super smart, so I'm sure they'll figure it out. But that's what I was doing earlier. So that's where my brain's been for the last couple of minutes. I'm excited to be here. I have a very interesting topic, and I don't know if it's been posted or if you've seen it. I guess I got a letter in the mail. Jeremy, I think your preacher's name is, called and invited me to come, and I was glad to do that. And he said he'd send me a topic, and he sent me a topic, and my topic is what the Bible has to say about sexuality, which is just such an exciting topic when you're a guest speaker in front of several people that you don't know. And I see it a couple of different ways. One of which is that I get to leave after this, and I can say whatever it is that needs to be said, and then I leave, and if you really, really liked it, then that's great, and if you didn't really, really like it, then that's great too, because I'll be gone. But then the other part of it is that it is a little bit difficult, because I come at this topic, obviously, based upon what the Bible teaches, but also from my unique perspective on what our congregation and my experience, specifically with teenagers, what it looks like and how it's influenced that perspective and that nature. And so, like I said, it's a little bit of a challenge. Andrew, I called him when I got my topic. I said, hey, I'm going to your home congregation in a couple of weeks, and they were so kind to give me the topic on what the Bible has to say about sexuality. And he said, well, did you see my topic? And then I looked and saw what his topic was, and so I said, well, I guess that maybe it could be worse. So, anyway, I'm very thankful to be here, and this is something that is as uncomfortable, and maybe it gives you a pit in your stomach to think about talking about sexuality in a mixed audience of those that are younger, some that are a little bit more experienced in life, maybe we'll say, and we have just kind of a lot of different feelings. Some of us are like, I just want to crawl under the pew. Don't want to talk about this. There's some of us that are kind of on the edge of our seat. They're like, yes, we get to talk about this at church. I hope that this evening what I say will not just be what the Bible teaches, but also be applicable to you, and that maybe it'll give you some thought, maybe something you hadn't thought about before, maybe some practicality, some things, some needs that we have. I'm a youth minister. I've been doing it for quite a while now. I did it in college some. And I worked in Pensacola, Florida for about 3 years, and I've been at Peachtree City for about 3 years. So my life for about the past 5, 6, 7 years has been teenagers, has been high school students, middle school students, a little bit of college mixed in there. But that's kind of where where my life is, and that's sort of where a lot of my relationships are. I have most of my best friends are middle school and high school kids, the kids that I talk to more, and you know, those that are not that age are typically youth ministers or student ministers that do some of the same stuff. And so this is a topic, and this is something that's so incredibly relevant, and it's something that unfortunately we don't talk about enough, or that we haven't prepared ourselves and equipped ourselves to talk about, so that it becomes an area that sort of seems chaotic, or seems sort of like a problem area. Very, very regularly, and it's something that you know, when you don't necessarily address an issue, whether it be with your house or whether it be with a vehicle, and you just kind of pretend that it doesn't exist. It always shows up, right? And that's the way that I like to think about topics that aren't easy. It's not necessarily one that you want to spend a ton of time on regularly. Like I said, it can be kind of uncomfortable, but rest assured, if we don't address the topic of sexuality, especially when it comes to our teenagers, it's an issue that's going to come up. And it's real, and it's relevant. It's something that the Bible has a lot to say on. To give you a little bit of a roadmap this evening, I'm a big believer in kind of letting you know where I'm going. I'd like to take a little bit of time and share what the Bible says about sexuality, about connecting the thought of where it came from, how mankind has used the idea of sexuality, and sort of God's warning or His preparation for us. And then I'd like to transition a little bit and talk for a few minutes about how as a congregation, or as a church in the 21st century, how we need to address sexuality, specifically in the lives of our teenagers, but even in the lives of everyone in our congregation. So that's kind of where I want to go, and we'll start out just very, very basic. And the first thing that I like to say and kind of point out to you is that sex was God's idea. It was not something that Adam and Eve figured out. It wasn't something that somewhere in the timeline of mankind that it was thought up. That from the very, 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 very beginning of time, sex was God's idea, and it was God's creation, and it was meant, it was designed in a very, very specific and a very special way to be held in the most intimate of relationship. If we think about Genesis chapter 2 and verse 24, very, very common to us, oftentimes read in weddings. It's very special. It says, "Therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." And what a beautiful book of imagery the Bible is. It takes something that we can kind of find maybe a little uncomfortable to talk about, and it uses the phrase "one flesh." This beautiful description of two people being forever united and to share in the most intimate relationship imaginable. And again, I point this out at the beginning of the book of Genesis to simply make a very obvious but important to understand statement that sexuality, it was designed in the heart of God, in the mind of God. And when we think about sexuality and its relationship to marriage, we also think about the relationship marriage as it's used throughout the Bible. I believe that God gave us family in a lot of reasons. He gave us marriage in a lot of reasons so that we could start to understand a little bit about the way God cares for us and about the relationship that He longs for us, this connectivity. You know, that's the relationship He describes, His relationship with the church. And how He cares for the church. And again, part of that is the extreme intimacy that you find in that relationship. And so it's very, very special. And unfortunately, because of kind of I use the temperature or maybe the climate in our culture when it comes to sexuality, we start to have a very, very, very negative, or maybe maybe negative is the best word, thought process or feelings towards sexuality. Something that we just automatically assume that if someone's talking about it, then it must be bad. It must be something that's wrong. And I don't believe that's the design that God gave. It was created for the most intimate, special relationship, a relationship that God would choose to use to communicate the way that He feels for His church and the way the church should feel for Him. And so I think that it's very, very important on the outset of this conversation or this discussion that we understand that it was God's idea. It was designed in the heart and the mind of God. Now, almost like every other thing that is good that God gives us, man has found ways abuse it. All right, I like to think about the different things that God has given us. He's given us financial blessing, right, in lots of different ways, and how quickly we use this financial blessing that is neither good nor bad. It is just a blessing, and we can choose with poor choices to abuse it, right? And again, you could take that in a number of different directions when you think about blessings or things that God gives us, and sexuality is one of those things that God gives us. But man, very quickly in the history of time, abuse it. And I'm not going to dig in on any of these topics per se this evening. I just want to kind of list very, very quickly a couple of examples of how quickly in the Old Testament we find mankind taking this gift, this blessing that was created in His image, and abusing it. We have an example in Genesis chapter 19 of Lot's daughters participating in pursuing incest, right? We have David and Bathsheba, the idea of adultery, and removing the marriage relationship from, sexuality from a marriage relationship in 2 Samuel chapter 11. Unfortunately, we see in 2 Samuel chapter 13, Amnon and Tamar, and the idea of rape or forcibly entering into this relationship of sexuality. And then we have the men of Sodom in Genesis 19, this idea of homosexuality. And again, I'm not going to dig in on any of these topics. I'm not going to weigh in on those specifically. But I point out very, very simply to show that God gave us this gift. It was from God. It was designed in the heart of God. But it wasn't very long in the history of mankind that man found ways to mistreat it. And again, as we think through multiple blessings that we have, multiple things, man is really, really good at abusing what it is that God has given us. And like I said, I don't say that proud by any means, but it is something that is real and we need to consider. So sex, it was God's idea from the very beginning. Man, he chose to abuse it, and he has, while he has honored it in several ways, he has abused it. But also in that same nature, God gives us something good, we mistreat it, and God warns us, right? And we think through the New Testament. I want to share three ideas just very quickly about what God warns us of. Have given you this blessing in this marriage relationship, sexuality, something that's good, and it's something that again, I wouldn't give you something that was bad. You've abused it, and so let me give you some thoughts. Let me give you some warnings about the consequences that will come from you abusing it. 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 18, probably the most common passage that anybody could bring up, and honestly, I think it's probably the most telling. If there's a passage I'd leave you with tonight on this topic, it would be 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 18. It tells us what? Flee. Couldn't be clearer, right? I mean, of all the and there are things in the Bible that are, I won't necessarily say confusing, but there are things that take a level of precision to understand. Sometimes we have to unpack context a little bit so that we can truly understand what something's specifically saying. There's no unpacking, there's no context to the word flee, right? Flee from sexual immorality. Every other sin a person commits is outside the body, but the sexually immoral person sins against his own body. Flee from sexual immorality. I've heard it say that the Bible tells us to flee, but far too often, as a people, we flirt with sexual immorality. So, again, God gives us this gift. We've abused it. Mankind has chosen to abuse it, and God warns us. Here's the consequence of that. First, He says, flee. Flee, get as far away as quickly away, get as far away as fast as you can. I think about the story of Joseph, right? And Potiphar's wife makes the advance towards him, and he physically gets away. He kind of practices this as an example, and there's no wait to find out about it. Get as far away. The word flee, get as far away as you can, as fast as you can. I think it's a perfect description of the danger of this topic. Also, we see in Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 4 that God will judge the sexually immoral. And now I know that's it's very direct. Let's look at it and read it together. Let marriage be held in honor among all. This is Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 4. And let the marriage bed be undefiled, for God will judge the sexually immoral and the adulterous. Okay? Not only is it something that you need to get away from as quickly as possible, get as far away from it as possible. Let's not try to get close to it. I need you to understand that this is something, and I'll address this a little bit later, this is something that has the capacity to separate you from God forever, okay? And I don't want to be just incredibly dark or negative, but I believe the Bible is incredibly clear on this teaching, that it addresses sexuality when it is outside of the covenant relationship of marriage, right? It's sin, right? And sin, as I mentioned a little bit, it separates us from God. And unfortunately, there's no way around that. And I hate to necessarily I guess be so negative and so blunt, but Scripture is so incredibly clear, as you know, is that sin it always separates us from God. Sin, it always leads to death, and this idea of abusing the sexuality, it always leads to judgment from God, and that's something that we find here in Hebrews as well as other places, the teaching of Jesus, etc. And then the last thing I want to point out about God's warning for mankind about abusing sexuality comes from Matthew chapter 5, the Sermon on the Mount, verse 28. Matthew 5, verse 28 says, "But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart." And so God gives us this gift. Mankind abuses it, and so God, he warns his people, right? He says, just so you know, you need to get as far away from this as you possibly can. You need to stay as far away and not spend any time around this very, very dangerous practice of sexual morality. He says, I need you to understand this is something that New Testament teaches us that it separates you from God. This can be the difference between an eternity with God and an eternity without, right? Very, very clear. And then Jesus, he takes this just a little bit further for us, and I don't want to say that it gets into a gray area, but it gets into an area where it becomes less about physical touch and more about the intent of the heart. And he says, what? You've heard it said that you shall not commit adultery, right? You should not participate in this sexual sin. But Jesus says, when you look at someone and lust after them in your heart, you've already committed adultery. And so Jesus, his warning is that he's extending sexual morality to include lust. And so that it's not just something that you physically have to act upon for it to be bad news, right? And here's the thing. I've said this, and you're here on Wednesday night, right? I imagine you're probably a lot like Peachtree City. You're here on Wednesday night, and so you've heard this before. You've heard these same passages, these same verses. I probably could have given you fill in the blank, and you wouldn't even have to look it up. I imagine you haven't heard anything new this evening. Nothing that I've said is probably all of that unique. It's pretty clear. The Bible tells us that the relationship we have between a man and a woman, it comes from the design and the heart of God. All right? All throughout the Bible and all throughout time, we see man abusing this gift outside of the relationship of marriage. And then we see countless examples throughout the epistles, throughout the teachings of Jesus about the warning of the dangers, of the consequences, and the magnitude of sexual sin. None of this is new. You've heard it before several times. And so the question I'll ask is this. Why is it that sexuality, sexual sin, sexual morality, adultery, things of that nature that can fit into that box in multiple different ways, why does it seem more prevalent than ever before? You see, I want to share for just a minute some things that have been going on with us at Peachtree City, and I won't go into any great detail, but I guess it was sometime around, it was prom season. It was around April. Had a mom reach out to me and say, hey, did you see so-and-so, their Instagram? And I went and looked, and it was a girl that was involved in our youth program that she has let the world know that she was a practicing homosexual. And it's kind of difficult, right? Because, there are kids in my youth group that are liking these pictures, right? A couple weeks later, had a mom text me in Bible class. When a mom texts you in Bible class, it's never good. She said, hey, I need you to come over and talk tonight. little girl went in Bible class. She'd been caught. She was in middle school. She was caught by a police officer in a car with an older high school guy. I had a teenage girl text me one morning. Anytime a teenage girl texts you and says, "Hey, you know something's wrong." But she texted me, she said, "Hey," and I kind of knew something was up, and she went on to tell me that she was in the guidance counselor's office because she was in a relationship with a boy, and her mom had found where she had been sending things on Snapchat, pictures that she shouldn't send. This is the world we live in, right? And I don't have to tell you that. I could tell you this and hope that it's news to you, but you live this, right? Parents, you live in fear of this. And I've got some stuff that I'm going to share with you that you're not going to want to hear, and it's going to be kind of scary. And I don't do it to scare you. I do it to build some relevance. So the question that I want to ask is if the Bible is so incredibly clear about the topic, and I don't know that there's anybody that would disagree with me about that, and if there is, please let me know, right? I feel like the Bible is incredibly clear about this topic. But it seems like, and I know in my own congregation with my own students, it becomes more and more of a relevant, persistent topic that needs to be addressed. We sat down as a congregation. We sat down with our eldership, and I said, "Guys, I want to address this." The elders said, "We want you to address it." I sat down with our ministry team, and we talked to people that have been in ministry for a long time, preachers for a long time, youth ministers for a long time. We talked to, you name it, right? We talked to professionals, mental health professionals. We talked to everybody we could. And we started to ask, well, why is this such a big deal? Why is this happening? Why are we dealing? And it wasn't, again, we didn't just you can see the kind of broad nature of the issues. We talk about homosexuality. We talk about lots of different things that you'll find. But we asked the question, why is this happening? Again, the Bible's clear. We teach the Bible. Why do we have these problems? And so we had this really, really kind of novel idea. It's going to blow your mind. We said, why don't we stop asking other people about why this is going on? Why don't we ask our students? And so we put out a survey. I put out about 60 surveys is what we ended up getting back. Anybody in our youth group from 6th grade all the way through 12th grade, and I begged them. I said, "Look, I don't want your name on it. I don't want your name on it. I won't read you put your name on it because I'm not interested in this. This practice wasn't about finding out who's doing what wrong. It was about trying to kind of get to the bottom of what's causing some of this. And so we asked some very serious questions. And I said, I don't want you to sign your name on it. I just want you to answer these questions for me. And they were questions like this: what is it that you wish that your parents knew about your heart? Ask questions. What is it that you wish that I could do as your youth minister more for you? What is it that you just really wish that you could say? What is the least attractive thing about church? What is it that turns you in? Is there anything that we talk about regularly, that we teach on regularly, that you just completely disagree with and you just can't agree? And we ask very, very, what would be kind of uncomfortable but incredibly relevant questions. And we got lots of interesting feedback. And so we sat down and we started to look through this. And so we're asking ourselves questions. The Bible's clear on these things. We talk about these things. Why are the children struggling with this? Why are teenagers struggling with these things? So we said, well, maybe it's something that they've never dealt with before. Maybe it's just something new and it's out of the blue. It's something that we can't really understand. And we started looking through the surveys. And Stan, who's been a youth minister at a couple different places for a long, long time, he's our preacher. He's reading through it. Chris, he's been at Peachtree City for 10 years. He's been around this kind of stuff for a long, long time. And it's all the same stuff, right? It's self-image and it's peer pressure and maybe it's phrased a little different and maybe it's through a phone and not face-to-face, but it's not anything new. And so we said, well, maybe we're not addressing these topics. It turns out that that's not the case either, right? Teach the Bible, right? We talked about this on a retreat. We talked about this. I promise I'm getting to my point. And so all that could be left is that we're teaching the truth and they just don't care. And that probably doesn't feel awesome to hear, does it? To think that you could be teaching the truth, something relevant, but that when it comes to our students, it should make a difference to them. And I tell you, I talked about this in our congregation. I actually got up on a Sunday morning and talked about this stuff, and I was nervous because I thought these parents are not going to like this, me saying this out loud. But let me ask you this question. Have you ever known something is wrong but chose to do it anyway? Adults. See, we asked this question on our survey. We said, is there there anything that you know is wrong, but you choose to do it anyway? Do you know that in the 60 surveys that I took back, not a single person answered that question? No. Every student in my youth group told me there are things that I know are wrong, and I choose to do them anyway. And like I said, adults, when was the last time that you knew something was wrong, but you choose to do it anyway? It's real, right? And that may be a little uncomfortable. It may not necessarily be something that you want to think about, but it's real, right? I believe as a church, and I think that we've kind of missed this for so long, and I'm not projecting that I have the answer to the question. And I think sexuality is just a piece of it, but I believe that we have far too long thought that as long as we teach what is right, it's going to take care of itself. But the problem is, as a culture, as a church climate, we've gotten to a point where knowing something is right and knowing something is wrong is not motivation enough for us to practice it. I don't like that. I don't like that it's true. I don't necessarily want it to be true, but the fact is, if all we're doing is teaching against something or teaching for something, maybe we aren't doing enough. And so the question at hand, as we kind of jump into this discussion here for the last 20 minutes or so, is how does the church address sexuality today? How does it address sexual morality? And again, the understanding, the underlying point, just teaching that it's wrong may not necessarily give us. And again, wouldn't it be a perfect world where we're teaching, something is true, something is not true, would make all the difference in the world? But unfortunately, again, it would be one thing if I said that and we're shaking our heads like I just can't understand why that happens. But again, when was the last time that you give you an example, and I may reference it again. Had a mom come in my office, and she was sitting. Peyton was in there actually, and she was sitting in front of me at my desk, and she said, she can't understand why my daughter's got this going on. I looked at her phone, it's got all this stuff, and she said, so and so, or sweetie, like, why is it that you're sending this? Why are you talking about this? Why are you looking at this? And she said, Mom, you just don't understand how hard it is. We go on and talk for, you can't imagine how long I talk. We talked for a while, and she said, I said, well, is she going to come to retreat? And she said, well, I just, didn't want to come to retreat. And I said, well, she lives in your house. Like you can tell her, say, look, you're going to participate in this because you live in my house. I made this choice. This is. She said, Philip, it's just so hard. Where do you think that this little girl learned that something being hard was reason enough not to do it? It was learned and it was taught at home. My mentor, Aubrey Johnson, some of you may know who he is, he told me that everything that a student or a child does was either taught or allowed. And I believe that to be 110% true. And so this phenomenon, again, I know it's easy for us to pump our fist and say, young people, but it's taught somewhere, right? And so how does the church address sexuality today? Maybe I've opened up a big can of worms on a lot of topics. We're going to address one specifically in sexuality. I have 3 things. That's kind of a preacher thing to do. Again, if you want to write it down, you want to remember it. It's a big kind of first thought. And the first is that if we're going to address this, we need to acknowledge the task at hand. We live in a culture where sex has become common, right? Listen to the radio, watch television. Women are being taught that the price of significance is sex. All right. Not only do we live in a culture where sexuality is common, that it's everywhere you go. It's in every movie. It's in every song. I make fun of country music. People like make fun of rap music, and rap music has lots of things in it. Shouldn't rock and roll. People act like country music's any better. I challenge you. Really hope there's not any big country music fans in here. Probably are. I challenge you. Cut on Luke Bryan I watch American Idol. I love Luke Bryan. I think he's hilarious. But, any of these guys, what is their music? We're going to the river in the back of my truck. She's wearing cutoffs. We're drinking moonshine. We're getting naked You laugh. Listen, you laugh, but people hate rap music. But listen, you can't even have a top country song anymore if it doesn't talk about, Daisy Duke drinking moonshine, having sex in the back of a truck, right? By the river. And that's, again, appreciate the irony in it, but you'll never be able to listen to another country music song again and not think about it. But that's our culture, right? Sex has become completely common. It's something we talk about on the radio. And I kind of got ahead of myself. I said, women are taught the price of significance is sex. Tonight, get out your phone. Go to AmericanEagle.com or whatever clothing website. Little girls, teenage girls, are being told in marketing that if you want to be significant, and the word significance is so important with young people, if you want to be significant, you have to be sexy. That if a little boy or a teenager, a little boy, if an adult male, if a young man is going to love you or is going to care about you, you have to be sexually attractive. And if you don't, then you're not going to be desired. You're not going to be significant. You're not going to be important to someone. And you say, well, what are you talking about? You don't know. Again, look at what they market to. They market to things that are revealing in nature. And I'm not parents, and I'm not like the elders or the youth minister here or the preacher, so I'm not like saying, hey, these are the rules, but you understand that the most, marketing that we see to young ladies is trash, right? And what that's teaching them is that if I am going to have any sort of value, I'm going to have to use my body. It's just not true, right? And then the last one is we live in a culture where men are taught that women are a commodity, right? And again, you go on to radio, you go to the movies, you go to any sort of guys are, hey, look, I'm just going from girl to girl, right? I'm gonna see her, and I'm gonna see her, and I'm gonna see her, and I'm not worried about their feelings. That doesn't matter. I'm looking out for me because if I'm a man, I can handle that, right? That's total garbage, right? I mean, and it's you're probably like, wow, I can't believe you're saying this in church, but it's true. Like, you think about it. We live in a culture where sex is everywhere, and it doesn't mean anything. We live in a culture where girls are told, if you want to be important or significant to anyone, you have to be sexual, right? And then we think about guys. If you want to be a man, then you have to take advantage of women, and whether or not it's to the extreme that I've kind of given that example, it's very, very real, right? It's something that all of us can kind of identify with. We can all see these different traits. And so my point, the reason why I bring that up, we need to acknowledge the task at hand. That's my first point. Because our culture is tailor-made for sexual morality. In the most I guess, simple way to put it, the culture, the world that we live in, it is tailor-made for this. I'm going to give you some statistics, and this is really, really scary, and it's really kind of uncomfortable, and so I don't like, it's not inappropriate, but it's just, like I said, it's taking me back as I prepare for it. I read it to my wife on the way here, and I said, I'm going to make you sick when I read this to you. CDC, I got these stats from some of these statistics from the Centers for Disease Control. Among U.S. high school students surveyed in 2017, 40% have had 40% of those have had sex in their lifetime, sexual intercourse. 10% of those who were interviewed in 2017, okay, of all the students, thousands of students they've interviewed, 10% have had 4 or more sexual partners. 7%, and again, I believe this is 7% of the 40% that have had sexual intercourse. 7% of those have been physically forced to have sexual intercourse when they did not want to participate. That's incredibly disturbing, and that's not even the worst part. Got some of these numbers from Covenant Eyes, a website. This is about pornography, and I'm not going to specifically address pornography, but I think that it sort of addresses the climate of sexuality in our country today. 9 out of 10 boys and 6 of 10 girls are exposed to pornography online before the age of 18. Probably knew that, or at least a figure that was staggering like that. The first exposure to pornography among young boys on average is 12 years old. 71% of teens have done something online to hide their activity, their online activity, from their parents. Here's what's going to blow your mind, and it's something that even now I had to look it up to make sure that it was correct after I read it. 12% of the internet is pornographic in nature. That would be 30% of all downloaded content is pornographic in nature. And $3,000 is spent on pornography every second. $3,000 every second. For those of anybody in math person here, we're going to give you some numbers here, okay? There are 31,556,952 seconds in a year. That means that the pornography business sees an annual revenue of $94 billion with a B, $670,856,000. If you were to total up all of the value of every NFL franchise, it would total $74.8 billion. Now understand that the NFL is the most valuable piece of television real estate on the planet. That means that when it comes to entertainment on cable television, there is nothing more valuable than the NFL. And the pornography business has it beat by billions of dollars. There's more traffic on pornographic websites every month than Netflix, Amazon, and Twitter combined. Now, I don't know, there's some of you that you may not get that. And you may not be technological, and doesn't mean anything to you. Astounding is not a big enough word. And I don't say that to scare you or to make you upset or to make you worry. I don't do that. I do that to literally acknowledge it, that we have to understand that this is a really, 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 really big problem when we think about sexuality. We have to understand that this is something that is huge. We have to acknowledge the magnitude of the task at hand. And again, I was going to say it to scare you, but when I give you these statistics and I give you these thoughts and these numbers and $94 billion, a year, that's just insane. I want you to understand something. I mean this with all of my heart. That as big as this problem is, that it is nothing in comparison to the love of our Heavenly Father. I need you to understand that you can hear those numbers, and I hope that it cuts you to your heart because you think about the bigness of this topic. But what I want you to think about, what I want you to walk out of here and think about when you think about those numbers is that there's nothing on this planet that is too big for the love of our Heavenly Father. And Ellijay Church of Christ, I need you to understand that in this city, you are who is going to show these teenagers that love. It is your God-given responsibility. It's your role. And so first, we need to acknowledge how big of a topic this is. We need to acknowledge the task. And it's mind-boggling how large it is. The second thing that we need to do, and I want to make sure that I sort through this very, very quickly. We need to address sin consistently. Romans chapter 6 and verse 23, I mentioned it already, says what? The wages of sin is death, right? You know that. If you were to go into my classroom with teenagers, you could ask them anything in the world. I'm not sure what you would get, but if you said sin always leads to, and they would say death. It always leads to death in every situation. Now, sin, it always separates us from God, and that, of course, leads to death. But the truth is, while all sin leads to death, we don't necessarily treat all sin the same way, and it begins with the way that we see sin. Let me give you a couple of examples. You see, we are appalled by murder, but we accept gossip. Right? We address racism, but we typically avoid the conversations about worry. We preach against hatred, but oftentimes we practice jealousy. You see, we look down on those who are trapped in substance abuse, but then we go home and we medicate by overindulging in you name it, right? We can't stand the thought of someone that's been caught stealing, but far too often we are all caught up in materialism. And the truth of this, you understand what I'm talking about. And my message tonight is not, hey, look, you need to be easy on all sin the way that you're easy on some sin. That's the exact opposite. But we need to consistently address sin. That sin is wrong. It's something that will separate us from God. And again, sexual sin is no different. Here's the thing. There's no one who is hated in our culture more than a man who cheats on his wife. There's no one. I mean, you hear that, you are disgusted, and you cannot be more upset and aggravated, disappointed, right? No one is ridiculed more than a teen mom, right? A girl that gets pregnant in high school. No one is looked down upon more. And no one is less approachable than someone that we know has contracted a sexually transmitted disease. And don't want it to be necessarily the case, but it's, you know what I'm talking about, right? There's no one. The sexual sin, it's not different, but man, it feels different, right? Addressing it feels different. And here's the thing. While all of the feelings about sexual sin, these feelings about it being so bad, and while we can completely just like let gossip go under the rug, and we can worry, and we can practice sexual sin is one of those things that we can't, you know, I guess I won't say get comfortable, but it hurts us in a different, special way. It's very, very real. I want to illustrate for a second how backwards our approach to preventing sexual sin is in that nature. I'll give you an example. I want you to imagine that I struggle with the sin of idolatry. Now, idolatry is not one of those things that people struggle with regularly anymore. Maybe not. Of course, I'm talking about in the sense of like we've got golden idol bow down, right? Probably don't deal with that here. Maybe there are other things, and that's another topic, right? Type of idolatry in our lives. I want you to imagine that I struggle with idolatry. Now, if you knew that was the case, you'd get rid of every idol in my house, correct? You wouldn't let me go places where idols were present. You would not let me consume media that contained any sort of idolatry. You would not let me spend time with friends who are, you guessed it, idolaters, because you get the connection between exposure to idols and the practice of idolatry. That makes all the sense in the world. Am I right? Makes all sense in the world. You struggle with this, we are not going to allow you to be exposed to it because we know that exposure to this, and really it's not even struggling with it, it's that this is wrong. We understand that exposure to this leads to the practice of. But when it comes to sexual immorality, ask yourself this question. How many platforms exist in your house that will allow you to access sexually explicit content? How many of those devices are being left unchecked? How many places do you go where sexuality is made common or used as entertainment? How much music on your iPhone contains sexually explicit content? And again, as I mentioned before, I'm not just talking about Drake. When was the last time that you watched a movie where characters in the movie had an extramarital affair? Better question, when was the last time that you watched a movie and the premise of what was being shown was two married people having sex? People don't even want to see that, right? People, I mean, really, like when was the last time that you saw something like that? But for some reason, we can't understand the connection between exposure to sexually explicit content and the fact that it's something that's completely consumed our culture. We can't wrap our minds around the fact that we consume and consume and consume and consume and consume sexual morality. And our teenagers and adults are addicted to pornography. We have to address sin consistently. We have to acknowledge the fact that the way that we come about sin, the way that we address, it's very, very much the same. And see, what this has done is two things, and very quickly, I'm almost finished. Our inability to address sin consistently, it's done two things for us. Number one, it's made our church the last place a person that is lost would want to be. It makes the way that we think differently about jealousy and sexual immorality, the way that we are okay with worry, right? But yet we look down on sexual immorality. It's made church the last place a lost person is welcome. It's hypocrisy, and it's unattractive. And number two, it is, and understand this word very clearly, it has deceived us into the practice of maintaining a threshold of temptation. Say that one more time, then I'll explain to you what I mean. It's deceived us into the practice of maintaining a threshold of temptation. In other words, in parentheses in my note says the statement, well, I can handle it. Well, I can listen to this because I can handle it. Or I can watch this because I can handle it. Or I can do this, and I can go here, and I can see them because, well, I can handle it. It's not true. It's not true. So we have to acknowledge the magnitude of this issue. We have to address and understand all sin. We need to address it the same way. We need to treat it the same way. And then lastly, very, very quickly, we need to avoid excuses. And in Ephesians 5, it was referenced earlier this evening. One of my favorite passages. I won't get into the background of the book of Ephesians. I believe it was written to a Gentile audience about kind of as Christians or Gentile Christians are trying to integrate with those of Jewish. Kind of interesting when you study the city of Ephesus. The culture probably very similar to, I'm not going to say we're in Metro Atlanta, but you can imagine, this very large, Metro Atlanta, outside Metro Atlanta area, very, very, very similar. It goes on in a lot of different directions, but in Ephesians 5, it talks about, as was mentioned earlier, being an imitator of God. And Paul identifies two things. I'm not going to read it. It identifies two things that stand in conflict with being an imitator of God and thereby threaten our inheritance in the kingdom of heaven. Those two things are sexual morality and idolatry. We won't talk about idolatry tonight, but when it comes to sexual immorality, all right, we could spend the rest of the calendar year fleshing out what sexual morality looks like and why it threatens our inheritance with God. All right, we could spend a lot of time doing that. But Paul uses the phrase in verse 6 that I think is so important, and I think we miss it because we sometimes as church people, again, we're on here on Wednesday nights, we think it applies to like dumb people or like people that aren't Christians, that didn't grow up in the church, that can't quote all the stuff, right? Verse 6 says, "Let no one deceive you with empty words." What are empty words? Very, very churchy, right? Let no one deceive you with empty words. We think, well, that's for somebody that just doesn't understand what it's talking about. No. I need you to understand. Empty words are excuses. Now, we, as I mentioned before, because I told you about how, hey, my daughter's struggling with this. It's really, really, she says it's hard. I said, why don't you do this? Oh, I can't, it's really hard. She learned that from somewhere, learned it, right? It's a learned behavior. You see, we have a PhD in making excuses and justifying anything that we want to do. As adults, that's the truth. If there's anything that you want to do, anything you want to miss, anything you want to practice, anything you want to watch, we have PhD in our ability to justify why it is that we can do those things. But do not kid yourself. Our teenagers are well past undergrad, and they have learned from the best. And so let me kind of dig in for just a second here as we round up this thought. When it comes to excuses, anytime you say yes to something, you need to understand when you say, yes, I'm going to participate in this. Yes, I'm going to be involved in this. Yes, I'm going to watch this. Yes, I'm going to listen to this. Yes, I'm going to go here. Yes, I'm going to see this. Yes, I'm going to participate in this. Not always bad, not always good, but you need to understand anytime you say yes to something, you're also saying no to something else. Okay? And anytime you saying yes to something, one of your yeses involves saying no to doing everything that you can to fleeing sexual immorality. I think it's sinful, right? What are we saying yes to that ultimately means that we're saying no to fleeing sexual immorality? What behaviors or practices are we allowing at the expense of our soul? Unfortunately, we have been too short-sighted that we think, well, if I can handle it, right? They can participate. We make excuses for allowing ourselves and our young people to participate in things. As I kind of give you a closing illustration, and I know I'm over about 4 minutes, and if you'll bear with me, I have about 2 minutes left and I'll be finished. What's your name? Spencer. How old are you, Spencer? 17. You're too old. Behind you. Isaac. How old are you, Isaac? 12. Perfect. That's great. Isaac is 12 years old. Okay? I'm going to point to you in a second, Isaac. Make a point. I want to illustrate to you how clear you understand this principle and how this is not, again, as I presented this to you, some of you are like, I can't believe you talked about all this stuff. You're going to go home and, cry. Some of you are going to go home and you're not going to let your kids have their phones. Some of you, I don't know how it's going to land. But I want to give you an illustration of how you understand what has to be done and the consequences of this type of failing to imagine the end result with this topic. According to the CDC, look at that, I've mentioned the CDC twice tonight. In 2011, 14% of all cancer diagnoses and 27% of all cancer deaths were due to lung cancer. After increasing for decades, lung cancer rates are now actually decreasing nationally as fewer people are choosing to smoke cigarettes. Cigarette smoking is still, although, the number one cause of lung cancer in the United States. In 2013, the New York Times said that since the 1960s, the prevalence of smoking overall has finally began to decline, falling from about 40% to 20%. And today, more than half of the people who have ever smoked have stopped. You see, people are so aware of the consequences of cigarettes that lung cancer rates are actually decreasing because people are keeping the end in mind, because people are understanding how big of an issue smoking is. They understand how big the topic is. They understand that it's not something they can treat differently than other health issues. It's something that actually has consequences, and they stop making excuses and actually stop smoking. Isaac is 12 years old. If Isaac came and stood beside me this evening, and I pulled from my pocket a lighter and a cigarette, and I gave it to him, and in front of you, he smoked it tonight, Isaac would not get lung cancer, would he? You'd be mad. I wouldn't get asked to come back. Isaac's mom and dad would probably be very upset with me. But the truth is, if in front of you tonight Isaac smoked one cigarette, he would not get lung cancer. But there's not a person in this room that thinks it's a good idea or is even remotely okay with it. Why? Because this evening he will smoke one, and tomorrow he will smoke two, and the next day he will smoke three, until after day, and week after week, month after month, and so on, right? Year after year, he will smoke and smoke until he says, Mr. Isaac, you're probably going to need to see an oncologist. Now, the sad part about this is that there are probably more people that are upset in this audience that I used an illustration involving a 12-year-old boy smoking than are upset about the fact that we do this with our minds and with the minds of our young people. We allow it to happen when it comes to their consumption of sexually explicit content every single day. And we scratch our heads and we say, I can't understand why. We teach them the Bible, we teach them the Bible, we teach them the Bible. And it's still an epidemic that is larger than any piece of entertainment in our nation's history. We have to keep the end in mind. And I'll tell you, the end to this story, the end to not addressing sexual immorality, it's not having a failed marriage, although it can happen. It's not a sexually transmitted disease, although it can happen. It's not pregnancy outside of wedlock, although it can happen. The consequence is that day after day, week after week, month after month, of saying it's just a phone, it's just an app, it's just a music station, it's just a movie, it's just a joke, it's just a whatever it is that you use to justify. Day after day, today, tomorrow, and the day after, until we wake up one day and our children don't know God. And I don't mean in this life, I mean in eternity. The consequence to not understanding the gravity of this situation and addressing it consistently, and understanding that there is no cure or pill that we can take that's going to address this, but what we do have is a Heavenly Father that loves us so much and that has extended a perfect example at times that sometimes is hard for us to identify with because it is forgiving but also very consequential at the same time. That image and that example is our hope. And it's what we have to hold on to. It's what we have to use as a measuring stick and as a solution. This evening, I'm finishing my contents up. I'm about to pray for you. I appreciate you having me, and I hope that you'll remember this evening that we have a huge task ahead of us. I didn't mean to come and scare you. I didn't mean to come and make you sick. I didn't mean to make you mad. But I did come to ask you to think. Think about the consequences. Let's not pretend that the things that we allow and the things that we teach don't trickle down to our young people. Let's not pretend that anymore, because for far too long we've walked around scratching our head like we can't figure it out. We've got to put our foot in the ground. It's going to be a little radical. It might be a little bit, bring us out of our comfort zones a little bit. But I'm like you, and I believe that our young people are worth it. And I think that our eternity, I think it's worth it. You know, I've said this multiple times, but I'm done. I promise this is it. I had a hard time, when I got ready to talk to my parents, because I really felt bad about what I was saying. Not bad that I was standing up for what I thought the Bible was teaching. I felt bad about the fact that I was going to stand in front of people that I really cared about and people that I really loved, and ultimately say, hey, look, I think there's a problem, and while you want to point to the radio and the iPod and the iPhone and the internet and say, oh, this is the problem, public school's a problem, this is the problem, this is the problem, this is the problem, I was going to have to say, look, you're the person that put it in their hands, right? I got call a lot of heat for the statement. I said, there's never been a device created in the history of mankind that has made sexual morality more accessible than your cell phone, and yet we let our middle schoolers go in their bedroom at night and lock the door. And I said, well, on what planet does that make sense? Got a lot of parents didn't like me saying that. I was very nervous about saying some of these things, and not because I'm ashamed of the gospel, but because I know how it is going to rest, and it's going to hopefully it makes us look at ourselves and say, well, what have I been allowing my students to do? What is it that I've been allowing in my own life? But Chris, the guy that I shared an office with, I was very, very consistent. He has a kid in my youth group, and we talked very, very regularly about this conversation, this topic. And he said, he said, I understand why you're nervous about it, but he said, I need you to understand that the difference between you saying some of these things and calling it to attention could be the difference between one of our students, maybe my son, spending eternity with God or not. I tell you, when you start to think about that being what's weighing in the balance, the decision is very, very easy. So I encourage you to ask yourself that question. As you get ready to have these conversations, or as you have this self-reflection, what if you made each decision and gave each thought this weight, and that this could be the difference between eternity with God or eternity away from Him? I want to pray for you, and then I'll be done. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, and I'm very, very blessed and humbled that you'd have me come up here. Thank you so very much. Father, thank you for the tremendous love that you demonstrate to us throughout your Bible. We're thankful for the blessings that you give us. We're thankful for the blessing of marriage and the wonderful creation that it is, and that everything that comes along with it, God. We're so thankful for that display of intimacy and covenant, and that you chose very intentionally to use it as a example of your love for us. God, we as a people, both those in the Old Testament through time and even to this day, have done a job on what it means to keep what you've given us pure. And God, we ask that you help us to block out the excuses and block out all of the things that we say yes to, and without recognizing that we ultimately could be saying no to an eternity with you forever. God, we know that there are those that are struggling here in this place, as there are all over. God, help this church to be a beacon of love and support, and that this is not a place where people that are lost or that are in need or that are hurting or that are sick with sin would come and feel like they don't belong, but that it's a place that they know that they'll be held to a standard that is much higher than any other standard, but that they will receive the love and the grace that is reflected through your word. And God, I ask that you equip this congregation of people to be that for both their young people, for their families, so that this can, again, be a beacon of hope and love for not just for your church and not just for those seeking salvation, but also marriage and the relationships that we have with our families. Most of all, Heavenly Father, we are so thankful for your Son Jesus, and we know that it's because of his tremendous sacrifice he made on our behalf, the perfect life that he lived, that we have this opportunity to be in covenant with you and fellowship with you, and we thank you always for it. It's in his most precious and holy name we ask all these things. Amen.